I do hereby affirm
that I will tell the truth
that I will tell the truth
and nothing but the truth
and nothing but the truth
to this committee today.
to this committee today.
Thank you.
Mr. Davenport, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen on the committee. My name is Peter B. Davenport. I'm the director of the National UFO Reporting Center, which has been located in the state of Washington since October of 1974. I'm delighted to be here. I'd like to express my gratitude to the committee and also my special gratitude to Mr. Stephen Bassett for having organized this gathering and for having included me in the witness lineup. I'm delighted to be here and to especially have an opportunity to present data to the committee that I think is of special value to not just every member of mankind on this planet, but in point of fact, every living organism on this planet. And what I'd like to do, Mr. Speaker, if the chair doesn't, or Mr. Chairman, if the chair doesn't object, is split my presentation into three brief parts. First of all, I'd like to present a little bit of material on my background. Then I would like to discuss the National UFO Reporting Center and what it is. I'm probably introducing it to many members of the committee for the first time. And then I'm going to take an opportunity to walk the committee through a number of the roughly 86,000 reports that are in our database that I've collected over the last 19 years.
Please, that's fine.
What I'd like to do is, the only text that I'm going to read is the first paragraph of my position statement on the issue of UFOs, a copy of which should be in the packet of 10 pages of material that I've submitted to committee members. And that first paragraph very simply is, the question of whether human beings are alone in the universe is the most important scientific question that has ever confronted mankind. And that is the issue that we are addressing today. A bit of my background, and I think it's important because when a person is a ufologist, there's always the question of mental balance. At least this is what I'm told by people who look at my data and look at how I collect that data. So just a few brief comments. I've worked in both the public and the private sector, have a very good education, and I think the committee has a one-page biographical statement on my background. Have an educational background in biochemistry and genetics, international business. I am a former Russian translator for the US government in the Soviet Union. In June of 1979, I qualified as an escort interpreter for the US Department of State. I've spent many years teaching at the university level. I'm a businessman, former founding president of a successful biotech firm in Seattle. So I'm probably not construed to be, or cannot be construed to be, some kind of unusual, quirky person. And I speak within that context. It's important to create the context so you can understand what I'm discussing this morning. Let me move to the second phase of what I'd like to present, and that is the National UFO Reporting Center. Founded, as I mentioned earlier, in October 1974 by my predecessor as director in that capacity. His name is Robert J. Gribble, a retired Seattle fireman who had a lifelong interest in the subject of UFOs. And in July of 1994, he turned over the reins to me. And I think I can honestly report to the committee that it's changed my life and changed my outlook on what reality may be. The UFO Reporting Center has a hotline, rings 24 hours a day. We also have a website, ufocenter.com, where over the course of the last 19 years, I've accumulated approximately 86,000 written reports. I estimate that that represents roughly 1/3 of the reports that have been submitted to our center. What I would like to do, and my gratitude to Congressman Bartlett, he gave me a wonderful opportunity yesterday when he made his, I think, commendable statement alluding to the press and the perceived lassitude there and how they behave with regard to the issue of ufology. What I would like to do, Mr. Chairman, with the remainder of my time is walk through a 6-page document that I've submitted to the committee and respond to the question that Mr. Bartlett posed, certainly rhetorically and perhaps tacitly yesterday: where is the press? Where are all the reports? And my hope is in about 7 or 8 minutes, the committee will understand a little bit better the reality, the apparent reality that we are dealing with in addressing the issue of UFOs. If the committee could please turn to page 1 of the document listing a number of reports. Out of deference to the chair, I would like to start with a report from the state of Alaska from the year 1936. And this goes back to a question that Congressman Cook posed, I believe in the late morning of Monday of this week. He said, where are all the reports from past years? And I'd like to address that. Eklutna, Alaska.
Yeah, that's it.
October 1936, 2 teenage boys working in that city of Alaska, at that time no doubt a small city, were employees of the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, building a camp there. They decided to hitchhike into Anchorage, Alaska. As they were walking towards Anchorage, hoping to get a ride into that city, they encountered an object that looked roughly something like a flat iron. Mr. Holger Berg, one of those teenagers, reported to me in September of year 2000. They were walking towards Anchorage. They noticed a light coming directly at them. They were relieved because it was cold in October of that year, and they thought it was a truck with only one headlight. Lo and behold, it turned out allegedly to be something else. It was a triangular craft that passed right overhead, scared them so badly that they dove into a snowbank to get away from it. Next case, McMinnville, Tennessee. Questions have been posed before this committee, and the committee has commented, do UFOs ever crash? Do they have malfunctions? On the 7th of January, 1995, precisely that seems to have occurred over the city of McMinnville, Tennessee. A fleet of objects seen descending over the airport in McMinnville for several minutes. One of them appears to have blown up. Tonight, during my longer presentation at 9 p.m., I will show the 5-page handwritten document prepared by an investigating officer of what happened there. If the committee would please turn to page 2, I'd like to, for a moment, address the issue of the Phoenix Lights case. Quite a celebrated case, probably the most dramatic UFO event that has occurred in the history of ufology since 1947. Just briefly, the 5 objects that loitered over the city of Phoenix for upwards of 2 hours were not less than 7 miles in diameter. I will present evidence tonight showing why we believe that is the case and how we calculated the size of them. Next case, Longview, Washington. An elk, an adult female elk, lifted out of the forest of the state of Washington before 14 witnesses at about 1 minute before noon. We have reported that. I've had witnesses on multiple radio programs talking about that case. Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, October 26, 1999. 2 airline pilots over the Dallas-Fort Worth area were shocked to see a large disc approaching their aircraft. It suddenly turned, it executed, they estimated a 120-degree turn in under 1 second. It streaked away from them to the east. We have the audio tape from the FAA through a Freedom of Information Act request. If the committee would please turn to page 3. About 2/3 of the way down that page, Challis, Idaho, September 27th, year 2000, 21:30 hours Mountain Time. 4 hunters were in a remote hunting camp near Challis, Idaho, about an hour-and-a-half drive outside that city. One of the men exited the trailer that they were in to secure food for dinner that night. He was shocked by what he saw hovering above their camp, a triangular craft, dark. His flashlight, as he jumped up on the back end of his pickup truck, swept across the sky. What he saw above him shocked him so badly that he fell to his knees and started yelling. 3 of the others in the trailer came out, and they observed the object suddenly, slowly move off, go up the side of a nearby mountain range, go over the top of it. A very dramatic case, and if the committee would like documentation of that case, I would call upon Mrs. Howe at the end of the table, who was present at the testimony of 2 of those witnesses. She later brought them to a radio program. Next case I would like to address briefly is that of Carteret, New Jersey, on the top of page 4. Very dramatic case in which certainly dozens, possibly hundreds of cars were parked on the New Jersey Turnpike in response to a cluster of yellow objects that were hovering above that turnpike. Just seconds earlier, they had been reported from Fort Dix, New Jersey, to be streaking across that military facility. Within seconds, they were probably 70 or 80 miles to the east, and it was reported by many hundreds of people. Moving down further on page 4, the location, Andrews Air Force Base, Waldorf, Maryland. Mr. Richard Dolan first alluded to this case on the morning of Monday this week. A blue object, there's an error in this citation. I think Mr. Dolan reported it accurately, however. A blue object seen streaking over Waldorf, Maryland on that date, July 26th, the year 2002, being pursued by 2 F-16 fighters. Minutes later, it was seen returning the opposite direction, also pursued by those same fighters. A very, very interesting case. The case below it, Meriwether County, Georgia, April 13th, 2003. 3 people driving in a closed vehicle. The driver was shocked to see a cluster of red objects pursuing his vehicle. Suddenly, those tiny objects, perhaps the size of golf balls, reportedly were inside his vehicle. They stayed in the vehicle for an estimated 20 to 30 seconds. Suddenly, all of them coalesced around one of the occupants of the vehicle, the older brother of the 2 brothers. This gentleman had had tragically, intestinal surgery just a few days earlier, had a colostomy. All of the objects in the car assembled around the surgical scar on the lower abdomen of this gentleman. Within seconds, they suddenly streaked off, interestingly, through the closed windows of the vehicle. I've had 3 of those people, those 3 witnesses, on an international radio program talking about their experience. If the committee could please turn to page 5. Seattle, Washington, June 20th, 2004. An adult male standing outside in the University District of Seattle was shocked to see a triangular craft suddenly streak across the cloudless blue sky. Very, very dramatic sighting. Others reported it to the National UFO Reporting Center. That case has been on our website for the last 13 years. Going down to a case at the bottom of page 5, the O'Hare Airport case of November 7th, 2006. Mr. Dolan, Richard Dolan, alluded to this case earlier in the week's testimony. A very, very dramatic case. A disc estimated to be some 30 to 40 feet in diameter, hovering above gate C-17 at O'Hare Airport, seen for perhaps as long as 10 minutes or even longer. I cite the case because of the drama surrounding it. That object was in what used to be called terminal control airspace, now called Class B airspace. Nothing should have been there over that airport. And it was suddenly seen to accelerate, as Mr. Dolan reported earlier in the week. It punched through 2 layers of solid overcast, leaving holes in the overcast. A very interesting and dramatic case, reported on national news, interestingly. Turning to the last page, if we could please, page 6. Chicago, Illinois, November 4th, year 2008. I will be presenting evidence on this case to include photographs of the very peculiar damage that a young woman's car sustained. We cannot demonstrate clearly or to everybody's satisfaction that the case is UFO related, but I will present the evidence tonight during my presentation at 9 p.m. Very, very interesting case of the mutilation of a car. I will leave it at that until I'm able to show the photographs. I'd like to close by citing a number of interesting cases that have been submitted to our center over the last roughly 10 months. We all are questing to know what all of this means and what's going on. The phenomenon appears to be very real. But in June of last year, 2012, the National UFO Reporting Center began receiving reports that I certainly do not understand. I don't believe anybody does. But the second week of June last year, and all of this information can be seen on the website ufocenter.com, we started receiving reports, credible reports from credible witnesses of clusters of red, orange, yellow, amber, or gold lights, up to 150 in a cluster from around the world. I've written several articles. We have several statements on our homepage about this phenomenon. It's very interesting, and in my opinion, it may represent the fact that we may have rounded the corner, so to speak, in the field of ufology when it comes to the dramatic nature of many of the reports that are coming to us. What the cause of these sightings is, we have no idea. But we have roughly 2,000 to 3,000 of these sightings posted to our website. If members of the committee would like to see details, I would commend to their attention the roughly 38 cases that were submitted to our facility on Saturday night, the 10th of November, year 2012. One of those cases on page 6 of your handout is that of Castle Rock. I cite that case because it was a report that was submitted to our center by a commercial airline pilot, retired, 37 years of experience. Driving east from Interstate 5, this is about 70 miles north of the city of Portland, driving east on Highway 504, what he saw frightened him so badly that he stopped his car on the highway, turned it around, and went back the other direction to get his camera and his wife. It's a very, very dramatic case. Again, one of roughly 38 cases. An hour and 12 minutes later, a retired United States Marine Corps officer and his wife encountered something very similar in the city of Los Angeles. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen, the question has been posed, is the UFO phenomenon real? And I pose to you the question that if it is not real, why have all of these reports been submitted over the last roughly 19 years? The UFO phenomenon appears to be very real. And I would like to conclude in responding to the very prescient question that Congressman Bartlett posed yesterday at about 3:05 p.m. Where is the press and where are all of the reports? Very good question, and it's a question that every serious-minded UFO investigator poses it to himself probably multiple times a day. I'd like to address the issue of the press. Many people have asked the question, why is the press responding apparently so strangely to this phenomenon? And from my vantage point, it's really a little bit different than that. I would split the press into two categories at least: the local, regional press and the national press. From my observation, and I've had hundreds of exchanges of information with members of the press, the interesting phenomenon is members of the local or regional press are questing for this data. A week doesn't go by when I don't get 3 to 5 queries from members of the local press, smaller newspapers, radio and television stations. But interestingly, when one gets to the national level, the interest seems to simply expire. A very peculiar phenomenon, but it tells us that people who are professional writers, who are professional reporters, are very interested in this phenomenon. And I close with a brief comment about the government's apparent position on this phenomenon. The government knows about this phenomenon. There is no doubt about it. I've had multiple exchanges, multiple conversations with all sorts of people who are in positions of authority in federal, state, and local government. Many of them admit that they accept the fact that this is potentially a very real phenomenon. I've talked to military officers, and senior officers, general or flagship officers, flag officers, who in quiet conversations have admitted to me that they are very interested in this phenomenon, and in their opinion, there is very real evidence in support of what this committee is addressing in these hearings this week. It appears that we are being visited on a frequent basis. The evidence supports it strongly, in my opinion. And with that, I will close. I think my time has expired.
Exactly. Thank you very much. It has expired.
Thank you.